Welcome everybody back to another episode of Finding That Next Gear, where we talk with high growth entrepreneurs, try to talk about their entrepreneurial story, where they took a company from inception and ideation to growth and scale. And so happy to have Brett Trainor here today. Brett, thanks for joining.
Oh, thanks, Beau. I appreciate it. I loved and been looking forward to this conversation. So I appreciate you having me on.
Likewise, I've been really excited about this conversation for a couple different reasons. I mean, I love to kind of dive deep into the entrepreneurial side of things, but there's also like your organization as well as mine. There's a lot of synergies about it, in the fact that we both left corporate America because we wanted to from a lifestyle perspective, and we also kind of have a mission to help others find that same lifestyle. But what I love about kind of you and your background is your mission statement that's right there on your LinkedIn profile, and it's to empower 10,000 corporate Gen Xers to escape the 9 to 5 and find freedom. So what's that all about? I love the concept.
Yeah, and it was kind of an accidental, not discovery, but it was about 4+ years ago when I left corporate, 25 plus year career, ended up in management consulting at the tail end of that, which I don't recommend to anybody that's later in their career. It's just,
Sure.
it wasn't a good fit. And then, corporate quit me or I quit it. It was kind of a mutual decision. And I ended up going into solo consulting. It seemed like the natural. They showed me what my market value was. I could continue doing. But after about a year, I realized I don't like to do this anymore, right? I don't want to manage project plans. I don't want to check down stakeholders across 6 different states. I'm like, I just don't want to do this. And then kind of stumbled into fractional leadership, which is your domain.
Sure.
Before it was really called that, or at least I didn't know it was called that, and enjoyed it, right? It was, hey,
Yeah.
it's a day per week basically, and I got to work with a number of different companies. But then I kind of discovered I can make money other ways using my old experience. One was being for lack of a better word, a reseller, or helping smaller brands into my network with some business development. That became a nice little revenue stream. There was some advisory, and I promise I'm going to get to your question here right now.
Sure.
Is about a year ago, I guess a little over a year ago, I rebranded my podcast to the Corporate Escapee, thinking, hey, that was me. I've done this. There's got to be
Sure.
more folks out there like me that are looking to get out but don't know what the options are. And I'm going to be honest with you, the first 6 months, the podcast numbers weren't great compared to what my old topic was. I had a little bit of traction, like coaching a few folks ad hoc, but by the time I got to October, I had actually rebranded the podcast already and done one episode under the new name. And then, as luck would have it, or fate, however you want to decide it, I started messing around on TikTok. Much to my 3 daughters' chagrin.
Oh, I can
And
only
they're like, you know
imagine.
what? Yeah, they're like, have at it, Dad. Nobody's gonna watch you. I'm like, probably not, but I'm like, hey, I've got a short attention span. I can just kind of rant or vent for a couple minutes. And that was late October, early November. And fast forward today, I'm closing in on 30,000 followers on the Corporate Escapee, which is my personal, but just branded that
Sure.
way. And it just unlocked an entire new business model that I didn't even foresee being out there,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
Because I'll take a breath and see
No,
if you
no,
have any
no worries.
questions
What's
there.
funny, just to draw a couple parallels. I was kind of similar in my journey, where I aspired to be kind of a consultant, like the original OG of like fractional, support, and got out, jumped out of corporate America, and realized that I actually had no interest in doing that myself, like zero. In that, my skill set and strong suit was really kind of connecting people and being that intermediary between companies and the folks they need. And it sounds like you kind of found your superpower as well, like along the way and accidentally, which I think a lot of folks that are entrepreneurs and that start companies find success kind of accidental with a certain hypothesis that ends up kind of completely changing once they're out and kind of taking some reps.
Yeah, no, 100%. Accidental is the perfect way, because as this started blowing up in December and January, I had no programs. I had nothing to do with folks. I was offering just a free 20-minute strategy session, right? Just to help people think about how to get out of corporate. Well, after about 150 of those, I'm like, this is kind of a waste, because I'm connecting with some really good and interesting people,
Absolutely.
and they're just kind of going off into the ether because there was no program. And so I think late January, maybe early February, I just started a free Slack channel to start
Hmm.
bringing everybody in to say, hey, at least we'll figure out what we're going to do later, but let's keep people connected because we had similar stories. Everybody was trying to do the same thing. So how do we get everybody working together versus just one-offs all over the place? And yeah, so that started the journey from the free community. Now we've got a paid mastermind that's a part of it. The podcast is seeing, really good numbers based on, and thanks to you, your episode did really well as a side note, sharing those insights. And so all of a sudden now I'm in a business that I had I must have had known something internally, or I wouldn't have been talking about it and
Sure.
thought maybe there's something out there. But that old adage, paving the road as you're driving 65 miles an hour, that's what's going on right now. So,
Yeah.
um,
I
but
think
in
most
Bray,
people kind of figure it out on the go, right? So totally get it.
so yeah, so super exciting. Like I
Yeah.
said, it's been a journey. Like I said, still figuring it out because my whole career has been basically B2B,
Sure.
right? And essentially, this is now B2C, and we're talking communities and training, uh, but again, I'm energized by the conversations because
Sure.
there's so many people that have spent those 2 decades in corporate and they want out and didn't realize that they had options. So, yeah,
Let's
like I said,
let's
it's
let's dig a little bit into your driver, right? So again, the mission statement's awesome. The 10,000 corporate Gen Xers, why is that kind of the crux or the cornerstone of what you're trying to accomplish? I mean, it sounds like, at the outset of the conversation, you said either you quit corporate America quit you, but why are you, aiming to be kind of the cheerleader for lack of a better term, for folks that are maybe feel trapped in corporate America, but are looking to do something different?
Yeah, I think it's just one can play off of, well, my career, right? At some point, and I can't tell you the exact moment that it stopped, where I stopped chasing the corporate climb and trying to climb the ladder and
Sure.
just said, man, I have zero control over anything.
Right.
I'm in a decent job, but I don't really like what I'm doing. Right? Am I going to do this? Right? I was early 50s at the time. Am I going to do this for the next 20 years? Because I have no plans of retiring or living off of fixed income. Because I don't think you had a pension either, right? There's some 401k and those types of things, but probably more importantly, I'm not ready to retire. So what am I going to do, right? So I think a lot of people were starting to get to that moment, and that's when I said, you know what, I can help other people get out. If there's more people like me, right, to just burned out, unhappy, I may have shared this story with you before, but about a year out of the consulting career, now I'm on my own. Finally got right, some momentum and some traction and starting to figure it out a little bit after that year. My wife and I were having discussion. She's like, what the hell was the matter with you? And she was talking about we were talking about when I was still in consulting, right? On the surface, everything seemed fine. Good job. Family was doing great. But something was just off. And so that's when I
Dying
figured
a little bit inside every day.
yeah. I'm like, what the, and resentment, right? I mean, there's different commutes, different jobs I've had where the resentment was growing, but it just was like, is this it? There's just no way. And again, I think
Yeah.
empty nesters now. And so I'm like, all right, stage 2 of my life, what does this look like?
That's
And to
second
be honest with you,
career. Yeah, it's great.
when I left, my whole thing was like, I just want to make more money than what I was making in
Right.
consulting. So that was my motivation. But as I got into it, I'm like, man, all of a sudden I've got time back. And if I've got this time, how am I going to use it? Shit, now I can actually get healthy,
Yeah.
right? If I want to live the next active 30 plus 35 years, hopefully
Yeah.
more. And it just refocused they called the 2.0 version of my life. I know it sounds foofy, but it was, yeah, better late than never that it hit
Yeah.
me. And again, this message is just resonating with a lot of folks. So I said, if we can get one more person out of corporate, then we've succeeded.
Yeah, no, it's funny. I do feel the times have changed. Of course, part of that's from COVID. Changing workforce. There's a lot of reasons for that. But I do feel like people are starting to value life and fun over work. And I had a similar situation where I was in my career, I was going to trade shows. I was relatively young for the position that I had. And I noticed that these folks were 10 years older than me. They're all at the same trade shows. They knew each other, and they were just ping ponging from like company to company to company in the same industry. And I thought the exact same thing. And no knock to those that are out there and doing that currently. But I thought to myself, wow, like if this is it for the next 20 years, then oh my God, right? What am I going to do? And it stuck with me for about 3 years. I didn't make any changes, but that was like part of the driver in my story for breaking out, because I definitely envisioned something different for myself, not necessarily something greater, but something different where I had more control over, family time, which is really important to me, and personal time and all this, and also mental stimulation, right? I don't like the
Yeah.
pain and doing the same thing over and over. And this is, maybe I over rotated too hard, because entrepreneurship it's a lot of variety, right? But that's awesome. So what's kind of like when you're talking with folks, I mean, what are you helping them with currently, right? Is it about maybe, breaking from corporate America? Have most already left corporate America? Do you help them put together a revenue stream? Is it coaching on kind of like best practices? Talk to me a little bit about kind of the service offering.
Yeah, I think at the beginning, it's just showing possibilities, right? What's out there. Because I didn't know what was out there. I thought I could consult on my own. I had a couple of small ventures during the course of my 25 years, but obviously neither one of them was successful enough to keep me out of corporate.
Sure.
And I didn't want to start a traditional business. That's not the path. I didn't want employees. I didn't want to deal with any of that, but I really didn't know what was out there. And so the first thing is just creating awareness that, there's fractional, because people are starting to understand that term a little bit, but there's a lot of other opportunities. So that's the first one, is get them in the community and say, hey, start to interact. Like, you got people from some really big companies that had really big jobs to folks that have been, CRM specialists for 20 years, right? They know the inside and out. So we've got a lot of variety, from tech to sales to you name it, and it's in there. And so it was one, knowing that you're not alone doing this, because I think you and I may even talk about first 2 years, I was solo. Half my network didn't even know I was solo. Most of my family didn't know I was solo. And so it just,
A lot of sleepless nights, for sure.
yeah.
Yeah.
And it helps when people know that. So it's a lot of it is just the education, understanding that the options are out there. And then where I focus more on is how do you monetize that corporate experience? And where I've kind of looked at it, corporate is corporate. It's, there's chaos going on right now, even more so than I think when you and I were still in there. Well, I know it is, just based on layoffs. And as we get older, there's just a whole host of problems. And so what I encourage folks to is look at that I see it, there's three markets, right? It's the small and mid-sized companies, startups, and nonprofits. Need your experience, want your experience, need your help, but couldn't afford it, right? There's just no way they can afford somebody that's been at, Microsoft for 2 decades, and now they're going to come help. But with the new business models, there's ways to leverage that experience and get paid to do it, right? Where you still own your time, you own the control. So it's really starting to figure out what that path looks like for each of the individuals. Some are good. They're like, okay, Brett, I got it, off and running. I'm going to go test. But others are like, I've been in corporate for 30 years. I have no idea how to have a conversation other than looking for a job.
Yeah.
Right. So it's some of the things you take for granted after being out for a while is just some of the basics, and getting them comfortable with, because everybody, and you probably hear this, that while entrepreneurship is more risky than corporate. I'm like, I beg to differ on that.
I think the table turned. I do not agree with that thought process any longer.
100%. And again, I tell people, you can always go back to corporate if this isn't right for you or you're not seeing the success, but give it a chance. And the other thing that I think separates, and curious your perspective on this, is the people that are doing right now are the ones that are winning. Just go do it and not overthink it, overanalyze it. You come up with the most perfect business plan. I think what, 2 or 3 decades in corporate puts you in a box, right? Don't take chances, don't rock the boat, just do your job, do what I say. But now all of a sudden you're like, well, can I do it these 3 ways? Try it those 3 ways. No one's going to judge you. If it doesn't work, you can try it somewhere else. And so I think it's just getting people comfortable outside of those boxes to start to, find that freedom and that flexibility that is out there.
Yeah, it's super interesting. I mean, I think first and foremost, you've got to start, right? I feel like far too many people just talk about possibly doing something, not doing it. And then the second point you brought up, which really resonated with me and something I struggled with as well, is like searching for perfection, right? Like I was like building a software platform, and I was embarrassed to like show it to people because it wasn't perfect. It was buggy. Fast forward 7 years later, and I care less about that. And I realized kind of the error of my ways, that like nothing's perfect ever. Right. And a lot of it is starting getting reps and then kind of figuring out it as you go. And that's half the battle. But again, I was chasing perfection, and you're never going to get it. And heck, I'm still working on things now, 7 years later, that I thought I had figured out that I realized I didn't have figured out.
Yeah, no, so true. And shout out to one of my old consulting buddies, Calvin Chang, because his comment to me was, Brett, done is better than perfect. And
Love
I still struggle with that to this day, but embrace it much more so than I did. And again, you don't have to be perfect, because a lot of these businesses you're going to work with they need foundational and fundamental type stuff to get set up. Right now, if you freelance or fractional into a larger company, then it's going to have to be more specialized. But
Right.
it's kind of going back to your roots, the things you learned, and help teach these businesses how to do it. And yeah, it's just a different way of thinking. So like I said, some grasp it and go right away, others are like,
Yeah.
I don't know. And so
So we talked a little bit about kind of your family situation, but and not to get too deep and too personal, but you mentioned the three daughters, married, and all that stuff, which is great. I'm a girl dad as well, two girls, 10 and 8. Um, but it can be shocking, and I feel like in entrepreneurship, it's one of those things that's often glossed over, right? They don't talk about how hard it is, or maybe your family thinking you're insane. It's always about the wins and the $1 billion valuations, right? But like, when you decided
100%.
to give this thing a go, what was the thought process? I mean, was everybody supportive? Was everybody surprised? 'Cause I know, at least in my situation, there was definitely some judgment that was going on, not from my wife or my children, but like, extended family. Like, why would you do that? Why would you blow up your life, etc. So just curious, kind of as to what your situation was.
Yeah, no, I think it's a great point. And definitely something everybody should bake into their decision process, because when I first ended up, like I said, it was kind of a mutual parting of the ways. I sat down with my wife and basically said, look, I can keep finding this corporate job, but we're never going to be able to do what we want to do and go do what we want to do when you do. So I think starting my own business is the path forward. And supportive, yes. Skeptical, 100% yes. And probably for 2 years, it was, we had the same conversation probably 100 times. Like, how much are you going to make? Are we going to do this? Where are we at? And so I made the decision probably just over a year ago. My wife and I now have a quarterly business review, and I sit down, I review everything that happened in the quarter. I make projections for upcoming based on where we're going. I give her all the highlights and the lowlights of what's working, what's not working. And that fundamentally changed our relationship for the better, because what I found with it when I was in corporate, she understood we're getting a paycheck every 2 weeks. We've got insurance, and she doesn't care. Right. And so now it's all right. I don't understand what's happening in the business. I don't know. I have no idea if I should feel good about this or I should be super worried and where we're going. And so having that, it's about 2 hours, and we kind of realign what we want to do and where we're going. And so it's super helpful. Now, does everybody have to do that? You don't have to. It depends on your relationship, but now friends are the conversation's gone from solo and consulting and advisory, which they kind of got, but now influencer or brand ambassador with followers. That's a whole new world with what I'm dealing with. So
So I love it. It means they're listening.
exactly, and trying to explain it. So I've got to get my sales pitch a little bit better with folks of what we're doing. But yeah, so it's so much harder if you don't have your significant other or partner, however, on board with it, because then you're fighting two battles: one trying to win over you're at home, and then trying to get the business and those types of things. But
Mentally
you know,
taxing.
yeah, it just, and I think she finally realized that, right, where if you're in corporate, unless you get to that C-suite, right, or you get bought out and you're right place, right time, depending on what your goals are, like if you have a simple life, you don't want to travel very much, you can absolutely budget off your 401k. And if you can do that, God bless you, kudos. That's just not going to be us, right? With three daughters, we're going to have grandkids all over the place, and we want to travel and do other things. And plus, I cannot sit at home and not do something. So I might as well do something that I want to do versus being tied to it. So
Yeah.
yeah, maybe a little deeper on the family side you wanted to go,
No,
but
that's
I think it's so important.
no, that's perfect. In fact, I talk about this a lot with fractional folks. In fact, when I jumped out, I think it was 6 months to get my first paycheck, and it was, that was difficult because in my mind, in my business plan, it was going to be a month to 2 months, and then I was going to eclipse everything I'd making in the first, 14 years, and that didn't happen. It took a while to kind of a lot of reps, a lot of understanding, but I found transparency is paramount and critical in this whole thing, and it's done the same with my wife and I relationship. In fact, just being open and honest as to highs and lows, because there's always going to be both, and it's
Yeah.
it's just trying to have more highs than lows is the name of the game on a daily basis. But we'll get you out of here in a few moments with a couple more questions. And so, in your journey over the last 5 years, has there been a point where you thought about hanging it up and going back to corporate, or when you jumped out, or when corporate quit you, was it like, hey, I'm done?
I was kind of at the point I'm done, but there's always that in your back of your mind. Is there that one opportunity? Because I did look at, one of the universities had a entrepreneurship type of a program leader. I'm like, oh, that might be a good blend and add some, but it would have cut off all the other things that I wanted to build. So the way my journey was kind of after the first year, got to the point where the revenue was good enough to, again, satisfy my wife and make sure that we're heading on the right path.
Yeah.
Was I completely confident every month where it was going to come and keep that sustainable? Not yet. I think at the year 2 mark, I guess maybe the better way, I think in the first few months you can find success. I think I had my first consulting engagement by the end of the year. I'm like, all right, I see we're close to replacing the revenue.
Yeah.
And then year 2 was, all right, I'm not going back. I think I've figured this out now, not to go back. But there's always that imposter syndrome, especially as I started to move, from somewhere more fractional, where that was 95% of my time, to what I'm doing with the escapee.
An influencer, a TikTok influencer now, right?
It's a shift. But like I said, I always know I can go back and find the consulting if I want to, or find a fractional role if I want to, just because a lot of it's just confidence in it. So like I said, and I'm curious if you find this with a lot of fractional folks, that seems to be a realistic timeline, right? Some success. And then the year mark is, all right, I think I'm okay. And then year 2 is like, all right, I got this. And then the rest is just figuring it out.
Yeah, no, I kind of mirrored that experience as well. But quick follow-up question for you on the confidence component. So what do you think the number one trait is for like entrepreneurs and fractionals, and also, escapees, for those that find success versus those that don't?
Yeah, I think it's just doing. It sounds so simple,
Yeah.
but take action. If you don't take action, you'll never know. And again, it's hard because there's probably some programs I should have launched with the escapee 2 months ago that I delay on. But again, it's, what really helped me solidify that was, because again, I mostly work and take calls just from Gen X, but we had, the occasional baby boomers and some of the older millennials. And again, because what I teach works across, if you've got experience, it works. But it was like a 25-year-old, I'll call him a kid because, 2 of my daughters are older than that now. And he's like, here's what I was doing. I can't remember if it was like a CRM specialist, something, but he had really good skills. And I said, here's how this works. Go find businesses that need this type of help. You package it, sell it to them, either help them set up whatever it is. But within 30 minutes, he's like, all right, I got this. All right, this makes sense. I think I can do this. And he just went out and did it, right? I talked to him 3 months later. He had already had 2 customers and he was up and running with this thing. And where other folks I'll talk to, 6 months, they're still reviewing and working on the business plan. And those
perfection, right? Going back to perfection.
Yeah.
Yeah, and not doing. No,
just do. It's okay.
I totally agree. And maybe tangential to that is what I found is this perseverance, right? It's being able to wake up every day and you have the same cadence and just kind of, be willing to put your head through a brick wall. Because a lot of times that's what it takes, unfortunately, right? That may not be inspiring to those that are listening, but it's part of the grind. And
maybe to add on to that too, because I think this is the important thing. Because if you've been in corporate most of your life and career, your agenda is set. Your days are pretty much set with meetings or what you're working on or what your project. All of a sudden, you have all your own time. And there was a transition to that as well, because you will tend to be super busy just doing busy work. But it's really being able to prioritize what you're working on and how to do it. And once you unlock that, it's a game changer because you do have a lot more time. You realize what you're working on is important, and having a little bit of a mini system. And I shared this the other day in our community that I went when I first started, it was just ad hoc. Everything was willy-nilly. I just taking it as come client calls when they had. It was just, a chaotic week. And then I over-indexed and went super structured and said, all right, from 9 to 10 and everything like that didn't work either. So I finally settled in the happy medium that I've got blocks of time. I do things, I've got client days,
Same.
and created some flexibility within it. And calendar blocking has been my friend. So long-winded answer to say you're accountable for your own time. And if you're not comfortable doing that, then you're gonna struggle, just because the days are going to get away and you're going to do more work than what you were doing in corporate, where the whole idea is to work less, work smarter,
Or
not
you're going to
harder.
do more or less value work than high value work. And that can be a time killer, but also revenue killer.
Yeah, exactly.
Two more questions, we'll get you out of here. And I appreciate your time, Brett. So if you give yourself advice, like prior to starting your company, what would that advice be?
I would have started doing this on the side. People talk about side hustles,
Yeah.
but there's a lot of ways, because again, I preach kind of starting with the problem that you want to solve, and then there's different ways to monetize it. So I would have started that ahead of time, instead of just going cold turkey without a plan. I figured it out, it worked, but there's no reason why whatever corporate job you have that you can't start, even if it's just mentoring for some of these business owners, right? You're not comfortable charging for it. You can test your messaging and how many folks
100%.
out there need it. And so definitely have the plan and start before, like I said, sooner or later we've all got an expiration date in corporate, so
Totally.
it's better to be prepared for it than waiting for it to happen.
Yeah, I mean, I absolutely agree. And that's what I share with like folks looking to become fractional. It's like, if you can maybe convert your employer into your first customer, that's great. But by and large, do whatever you can while you're employed. I mean, you can moonlight. I did a lot of work in the evenings, on the weekends, like a tremendous amount, prior to jumping out. And I didn't do so cold turkey. But then of course I jumped out, and all the hypotheses that I had seemed to, ended up being incorrect. But that's a
Yeah,
story,
yeah,
that's a
yeah,
story
yeah.
for another day. And then lastly, what's your vision for the next 5 years, and beyond with the corporate escapee?
Yeah, you know what? I'd love to see this go. I don't know where it's going to go at this point. Yeah, it's one thing I've learned too, that 5 years is an eternity. I mean, I just look back. If you
It
would have
is, but
asked
it's
me
not. I
six,
just hit seven, and seven was
yeah,
daunting, 2 years ago. But now I'm here.
that's a good point. And again, I guess even 6 months ago, I had no idea what I'm working on now would be there. Now it's just really, how do we build I didn't think I wanted to build the community, but that's kind of the most important piece of
Yeah,
this, because now I've got a bunch of folks that I can share ideas off of that I
sure.
didn't have before. Um, yeah, so I'd really like to have, again, the goal is get those 10,000. So I'm going to stick with that. Can I get 10,000 people out of corporate America doing their own thing,
Yeah,
taking the freedom back? I know it sounds a little corny, but and again, I still want to make the money. And again, I want to build something that I can work on for the next 20 years, but maybe it's part-time, right? I can start to plug people into different pieces of the business once we get there. So that's my vision. My short-term goal is to get out of the fractional type of work. Not that I don't enjoy it, but if I can put 100% of revenue and my focus on the escapee, that's what I want to do.
I love it. So where can people get a hold of you or find out more about you, and as well as kind of the work that you're doing with, the corporate escapee?
Yeah, I mean, LinkedIn, obviously being in corporate and now working with corporates is a great place. So Brett Trainor there, and the website's bretttrainor.com, three T's there in the middle with an OR, and all the information's there. And if anybody's in corporate and thinking about wanting to get out and not sure, come join the community, right? You'll meet some folks, you'll see where other people are, you can bounce ideas off of them. And yeah, we'd love to see those folks. And I'm happy to have it. If anybody's interested, again, I'm still offering the free 20-minute mini strategy session.
Mhm.
Obviously you heard some of my theories and things today, but I'm happy to share how I think your skill set would translate into this other world and maybe where some opportunities are. So at this point, still taking those sessions, but
Yeah,
like I said, TikTok kind of made me block those calendar times because it was filling it up too quick. So
not a bad problem
yeah,
to have, though. But we'll add some links to the podcast and the notes, so people can reach you. And Brett, Really appreciate you joining, man. Sincerely. Thanks for your time
I
today.
appreciate having it. I love when we have these conversations, and yeah, let's keep it going. Again, we've got a shared values, shared missions. So I appreciate the time as well.
Likewise. Thanks, man.